But yeah, does this make sense to anybody as to why we'd be releasing a guy responsible for 400 tons of cocaine coming into this country as we're supposedly undertaking this narco-terrorist drug war and murdering people in broad daylight and then posting the videos online? Does that anybody in the chat make sense? No? Okay, didn't think so. This is probably the clearest example that like people like Mark Kelly and the other senators that were, again, just reminding our military service personnel that they have a duty not to engage or follow in illegal orders. This is what they were talking about.
Calling this fake news, but just a few hours ago, the Senate opened an investigation into the strike to determine if illegal orders were issued to our uniformed personnel. And short
answer to that is yes. Short answer to that is yes. Per international law, per fucking maritime law, per the Geneva Convention, per probably, and we don't know what the active rules of engagement are in this non-war war against narco-terrorists that probably aren't narco-terrorists. But again, that's what makes this whole thing like a really big gray area, which is why they've engaged in this. But yeah, how much more clear could it be? Kill them all, right? When you strike a boat and you see two survivors clinging on to the side of that boat, and then you decide to finish them off, even though they are of no threat. The narcotics, the supposed narcotics, are now at the fucking bottom of the ocean, so they're not going to be able to make it. So what is the reason that we're now engaging in that second strike? Why would we be killing these? Why not just scoop them up, arrest them, detain them, question them? It doesn't make any sense. And it's a pretty clear act by the United States against all of those laws that we mentioned before.
Subsequently followed. Now, diving into what we know, starting with the original report in the Washington Post, that will be linked in the description below. And of course, we're going to get into the Pentagon's response to these allegations as well. The Washington Post said, quote, Defense Secretary Hegseth gave a spoken directive, according to two people with direct knowledge of the operation. Quote, the order was to kill everybody. Talking about the initial strike on September 2nd, they say a missile screamed off the Trinidad coast, striking the vessel and igniting a blaze from bow to stern. For minutes, commanders watched the boat burning on a live drone feed. As the smoke cleared, they got a jolt. Two survivors were clinging to the smoldering wreck. The Special Operations Commander overseeing the attack ordered a second strike to comply with Hegseth's instructions that subsequently killed both men.
So this commander that was in charge there, because of the direct order given by Pete Hegseth, now found it and took it upon himself to finish off the two survivors clinging on to the side of the boat because of the direct orders given by the Secretary of fucking Defense, Secretary of War, as he likes to be called now, to leave no survivors, to kill them all, right? Again, in a legal order, zero reason whatsoever to, again, finish those two people off when they have posed absolutely no threat whatsoever, right? Not only that, but it is now a maritime situation where they don't pose a threat. The narcotics no longer, or supposed narcotics, alleged narcotics no longer in the vessel. Now a maritime situation where these people are in active danger. It's an emergency where the United States should then be on the side of, again, at least scooping them up out of the water, detaining them, making sure they survive, and then we can question them and get more information on maybe what the hell was going on, the activities, where they came from, what they were carrying, right, as opposed to finishing them off, quote, killing them all and getting zero information from whoever they may be.
They say SEAL Team 6 conducted the intelligence collection and targeting for this attack and several others, according to two
Now, again,
people.
not only is the commander for SEAL Team 6 now actively involved in this and could be, liable legally for his actions, but now this gives and taints SEAL Team 6. You know what I mean? Now SEAL Team 6 isn't in the news for doing something heroic or something brave or something awesome. Now they're in the news for following illegal orders from the Secretary of War to eliminate, to murder in cold blood people that were, again, clinging on to the side of a boat that posed absolutely no risk, no threat to the lives of the crew on the vessel or whoever was nearby. You know what I mean?
The protocols were changed after the strike to emphasize rescuing suspected smugglers if they survived strikes. And we have seen that. A strike just a few weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago now, led to the U.S. Navy going out to pick up these suspected smugglers.
Right, and what did that lead to? This is the same event that we were talking about. This led to not only them not arresting, but making sure that these people got back to their country of origin. So what does that tell you? wouldn't they be like fucking amped up? Wouldn't they be ready to go and ready to handcuff these people if they were like already 100% like deemed and confirmed to be narco terrorists, right? On their way to the United States to try to kill millions of people, as Donald Trump loves to put it. Why would you send those people back to their country of origin so they could continue working in the drug trade if that's what they're like? Nothing about this adds up.
And then actually returning them to their home country. The Washington Post continues saying, in briefing materials provided to the White House, JSOC reported that the double tap was intended to sink the boat and remove the navigation hazard to other vessels, not to kill survivors. They say a similar explanation was given to lawmakers in 2 closed-door briefings, according to 2 congressional aides.
Which again is their excuse that they're given, their reasoning that they're given, but does not, again, tell or paint the picture as to why these people would not be rescued first, and then you could blow up the vessel as to, to sink it so it's not floating around, in the way of shipping and cargo vessels or whatever it may be, which is what they're trying to say now. Wouldn't have been that difficult to go in, remove the survivors, and then do that, right? Which, again, several instances that we could point to, probably the most famous of which being the Peleus, right? So let me see if I can put this on the screen. So, anybody that, knows World War II or anybody that does their deep dives into history has probably heard of this situation where in 1944, the Peleus was traveling from Freetown to Buenos Aires, right? And then on this trip, she had a crew of 35 men, mostly Greek, 18, but also British, Chinese, Egyptian, and 4 others. And then U-852, Captain Heinz Wilhelm Eck decided to attack the Peleus, tracking her until nightfall. U-852 closed with her target on the surface and fired 2 torpedoes at close range. Peleus was hit, the first exploding in the number 2 hold, and then the second just aft in the number 3 hold. She quickly broke up, sinking in 3 minutes. All was left of her was the flotsam, including several life rafts and the survivors of her crew, perhaps their number. Eck took number of men aboard for interrogation, right? And then Pierre Newman, a seaman, having established her name and details, had returned to their raft. At this point, Eck decided he must hide the evidence of his action by destroying the debris, including the rifle rafts and, by implication, the men from them. So basically using machine guns, using small arms to kill survivors, kill people in the life rafts, to get rid of the evidence of the debris, right? Despite their efforts, not all the wreckage was destroyed. Four of the crew survived, though one, Kafalas, died later of a wound in his arms. But at the end of the war, in October 1945, 5 members of the crew were tried as war criminals and convicted. 3, Eck, August, and Hoffman, second watch officer, and Walter Weifenspignig, the boat's doctor, were executed, and 2 others, Hans Lenz, chief engineer, and Wolfgang Schwender, the pilot, were imprisoned. Right. So this is just, one example that we could point to where a similar action, a similar situation undertaken, obviously, involving more individuals, more numbers of people. But, you can look at this and say, OK, how is this different? You struck the ship. The people went in the water. You saved a couple, but then you decided to machine gun a bunch of them to get rid of the, to get rid of the evidence. Right. You know what I mean? Basically, what happened here, they're trying to sink it, saying that they're trying to get it, remove the navigational hazard. But what they did was remove 2 human lives in the process. And then, there's obviously different cases that you could talk about. The Italian massacres, La Paradise massacre. There was a bunch of them in here. There was the Malmedy massacre where, 74 members of the Waffen SS were tried for the killing of unarmed American soldiers. Approximately 100 Belgian civilians during the Battle of the Bulge. All were found guilty and many receiving death sentences. So there's a bunch of different stories like that. So again, similar situations happening now, being rightly called out by people around the world. This is the same situation that we saw the UK and different countries, take back and stop sharing their intelligence with the United States to remove themselves from situations just like this. Right, we reported that here on Blunt Politics, where the UK, I think it was France, the UK, and a couple other countries had, actively stopped sharing intelligence, specifically in this theater of action with the United States, to remove themselves from culpability, remove themselves from liability, in just for this exact purpose right here.
Nation prompted frustration among some members of Congress who say they believe the Pentagon has been deceptive in its description of events. Todd Huntley, a former military lawyer who advised Special Operations Forces for 7 years and now is the director of National Security Law Program at Georgetown, said, quote, even if the United States were at war with the traffickers,
Listen.
an order to kill all of the boat's occupants if they were no longer able to fight would in essence be an order to show no quarter, which would be a war crime.
So listen, what he's saying is, even if we are at war, even if we were even in an active shooting war, signed off by Congress, even if that was the case, right? These people now in a position where they're not fighting back, they're not in a position to cause you any harm, they have no weapons, they're clinging on to the side of fucking, burning wreckage in the middle of the ocean, right? That would be a position where you would now be required to, give them care or, give them quarter, right? Which is what was mentioned there. So to give people no quarter would be actively against the Geneva Convention, even if we're at a time of war. So now at a time of peace, you can see how egregious these actions would be on top of, again, the other situations, the other boat strikes that have been undertaken.
Diving into the legality here, we're turning to Jack Goldsmith, who works at Harvard Law, formerly headed the Department of Justice Office of Legal Counsel. And
again, if there's still people like, oh, well, it's about the drugs and they're killing people, then why is this a thing? Why is Trump pardoning ex-Honduras president Juan Hernandez, or whatever the hell he is, right? Who, again, was responsible for teaming up with many of the cartels and was responsible for, I think the number that was reported was something like 400 to 500 tons of cocaine coming into the country. Right. So let's just play a clip of this just for everybody. It's like, well, it's about the drug, the drugs, and the drugs is the reason. Well, okay, then explain this.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Friday made a major intervention into Honduran politics days before the country's presidential election, pardoning a convicted ex-leader and threatening to cut U.S. support if his preferred candidate loses. Trump said he will pardon ex-president Juan Orlando Hernandez, who was convicted last year in a U.S. court of drug trafficking charges and sentenced to 45 years in prison.
45 years in prison by a United States court, right? And is now getting pardoned. At the same time, Donald Trump says he's actively engaged in a drug war. So what are we doing? How does that make sense? How did MAGA? Anybody MAGA? Any MAGAs in the chat? Let me know. Any just straight up Republicans? Maybe you don't even have to be MAGA, but any Republicans in the chat that may have an answer to this, may be able to explain why at the same time he's murdering people in the Caribbean, for this so-called narco drug war that he's undertaken, but at the same time releasing people like this asshole, and then you got people like this as well. And again, nothing against these two. If I'm not beyond the thought of rehabilitation and people changing their lives. I'm not. But again, this story does not line up with what the Trump administration is telling everybody that they're undertaking, right? And we'll go back to the other one. But this is another story where President Trump pardons two brothers who are, were cocaine kingpins, right? Check this out.
We just stay busy around here.
Tia's on the Bluff in Fort Worth is a family-run restaurant with two brand new employees.
Trash, dishes.
Brothers, Edward and Joe Sotelo.
85 days of work nonstop.
85 days since they were released from federal prison. A day they say they had no clue was coming.
9:15 in the morning on May 29th. They came and told me President Donald Trump just released him.
Described as cocaine kingpins in the past, they were arrested in the mid-90s in Fort Worth and convicted of a nonviolent drug conspiracy. Their sentence, life in prison.
I kept telling him, I said, through emails and everything, I said, I'm going to get this out.
Right, and if you'll remember, this is remember this woman? Remember this woman here, guys? Check this out.
I am the White House pardon czar for the United States of America.
Johnson was granted a full pardon by President Trump in 2018 and was asked.
Remember that big story where this woman was given a pardon by Trump in 2018? Well, she was now responsible. She was, as you just heard, now the pardon czar. And again, I'm not good on rehabilitation. Awesome. I'm not, opposed or against the thought of people rehabilitating their lives and changing and wanting to make a difference, right? But again, so now Donald Trump has put somebody that he pardoned for drug crimes in charge of pardoning other people for their drug crimes. Okay. All right. You see how that could maybe possibly a conflict there? You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe this is them. I don't know. I'm not going to allege anything, but you can see how it doesn't align with what they're trying to purport in the media.
This year to look for prisoners who deserve a second chance. She says the Sotelos stood out.
they were sentenced under old mandatory laws that today, if they were sentenced, they would not have received a life sentence. And what really struck me about them was their rehabilitation.
30 years into
And again, like I said, nothing against these two, nothing against that woman either, or the fact that they've rehabilitated or changed their lives, allegedly. But again, if we're talking about what this administration is trying to do and what they're trying to get across in the news, this doesn't line up with with what they're saying or doing at all, right? I think we can all kind of agree on that one.
Hernandez, who led the Central American nation from 2014 to 2022, was accused by U.S. prosecutors of facilitating the import of some 400 tons of cocaine into the
400 tons of cocaine, right? As opposed to how much could possibly be on those fishing boats, right? I mean, the guy, does this make sense to you guys? This is like giving back, I don't know. I'm not even sure what the correct metaphor or like a one-to-one connection would be, but it does, again, you can't be striking 20-foot fishing boats that may have, at the most a couple hundred pounds, when this guy's responsible for 400 tons, and you're like, all right, send him back. Not only that, but maybe we should put him back as leader, as in Honduras, even though he was convicted in the United States and sentenced to fucking life.
United States.
Oh, excuse me, what was it? 45 years. So sorry. But yeah, does this make sense to anybody as to why we'd be releasing a guy responsible for 400 tons of cocaine coming into this country as we're supposedly undertaking this narco-terrorist drug war? In murdering people in broad daylight and then posting the videos online? Does that anybody in the chat make sense? No? Okay, didn't think so.